And this is the big story segment on the AM show. We are taking a look at Ghana's cocoa revenue that stands at $1.7 billion, recording an all-time low in 15 years, with dwindling production and existential threats of galamsey cited as major causes. Let's unpack the issues right here in the studio as we engage our data analyst, Isaac Kofi Ejay, in the studio right now with us to sets it rolling. Isaac, what's happening to the cocoa industry?
Well, today the big story came with a big drop, and that big drop is on the Smart Wall, Ghana's cocoa revenue, export revenue. We can all agree that cocoa revenue actually is the main backbone of the Ghanaian economy. Why do I say so? If you look at our three top exchange rate earners, you talk about gold, you talk about oil, and talk about cocoa. It is only cocoa that we can beat our chest and say that we get more than 90% of whatever we export. In 2024, we exported more than $11 billion worth of gold, but we all know that we only got about 15%, same with oil. But for cocoa, whatever we get is ours. And so when there's a drop, we should be concerned because this is the main source that helps with the stability of the city.
Even before you proceed, what are we doing right? That's the only one that looks like we have majority of the
Absolutely.
share. What are we doing right?
I think it's the regulation. I think that's the same thing that the current government wants to do with gold. That's why they are setting up the gold board. So you have cocoa board and gold board. So cocoa board is supposed to regulate the presence of gold, cocoa in the system, and then gold also for go from the small scale mining and also maybe large scale.
Right. Now
that is the drop you see on the wall. In 2023, we were looking at somewhere $2.1 billion. Now it has dropped to $1.7 billion. And we remember that I think somewhere October, we made a projection that looking at where we were by August, it was impossible to reach that threshold of $2 billion every year. And it was right. We ended 2024 with just $1.7 billion. I think that this trend analysis tells a story proper, how we have reduced from as high as $2.8 billion in 2021 to somewhere $1.7 billion in 2024. You can see that this sends us back to a 15-year low to somewhere $1.49 billion that we saw in 2008 and 2009. Now we are back to that level, and that tells you that there is something really wrong. I'll show you one graph that shows...
And Kofi, you can just look at the impact there. If you look at the difference, that high in 2021 and where we are now, 1.7 billion, that's a deficit of 1.1 billion.
It's gone. Yeah.
Imagine what impact that will have on our economy.
That's more than think half of what we are even requesting from the IMF. And we've spoken a lot about some other foreign exchange earners that if we pay attention to, we might not be going to the IMF almost every 4 years. We've spoken about remittances, for instance, and cocoa export revenue, because that is the mainstay of the Ghanaian economy. And when there's a drop, I think we should all be worried. Now, this is the source. This is the reason why we are seeing the significant drop in export revenue. Definitely, when you have production falling, you don't expect to be getting the same amount that you used to get. And remember that last year was the year that cocoa had one of its highest prices on the global perspective, where prices went as high as, I think, $11,000 per ton.
Yeah.
But we could not cash out around that time because we had done what we call the forward sales. So we had even sold the cocoa that we had not even harvested.
The syndicated loan.
Absolutely. And when you do that, it means that whatever that goes on in the world market, you are blind to that. You don't participate in that. And we've seen that 2024 in this year, this is the lowest we've actually had in terms of the production. Somewhere 550,000 tons in 2025. Compare that to what we saw in 2021, 2020. Over 1 million tons that we produced in that year. Why so? Now we begin to bring in the key factors. Smuggling is one of them. For instance, last season we saw smuggling taking away some 150,000 tons. Was smuggled out of the country. Imagine we were able to add that. We could get to somewhere 600.
And then you must also look at why people are smuggling.
Exactly.
Because then that comes into...
Absolutely. Because of the gap in what Cocoa Board is offering and what the black market is also offering. So definitely if there's a cocoa farmer who, I mean, if Cocoa Board is granting that person 3,000 cedis per bag and they can sell it for 5,000 cedis, definitely you should know that they will go for that alternative.
It's criminal, but they would.
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Now, the reason why we saw the high, production in 2020 and 2021 was because this was the COVID period. And remember that the COVID period was when we closed most of our land borders. So it was almost impossible to do anything smuggling, right? And around that time too, you did not have illegal miners going on site. Galamseyers were also taking some leave. They were on holidays. Yeah. So it means that the cocoa space had a breathing space around that time. That is why we were able to record that high figure. Of course, the government also did some fumigation exercises, also helping the farmers in a certain way. But predominantly...
So maybe that is something else we ought to look at. But if you look at the trend from that high of 1 million, mind you, in 2017, 2018, we had over 900,000. In fact, previously, we had hit something around 800,000 before. But then it's a clear trajectory. Look, from 1 million, you fall to 683,000. That's a deficit of about 320,000, almost.
Yeah.
Then you fall further, 654. So the decline has been steady.
And very, very sharp. And this was a period that, according to the president, he put his presidency on the line to fight Galamsey. And definitely the cocoa sector actually benefited. But we've all seen that in his second term, I mean, the fight against Galamsey wasn't that as, exactly as his first term. So definitely that is one key factor that you cannot take out. Galamsey is a big thing. And you can see that even between Ghana and Ivory Coast, the two countries, the two neighbors, account for more than 60% of the global production of cocoa. And so last year and even this year, I mean, when chocolate prices are rising, this is Valentine's season, chocolate is the main, the main product. And we know that when cocoa is struggling, when you're buying the chocolate for your girlfriends and other, I mean, it will be an expensive price. And boyfriends. It will be expensive. And it's because the cocoa sector is struggling.
Right.
Now, I spent some time in, I think about 3 villages in the Ashanti region around the Lake Bosomtwi during the Christmas period. And you see, Ben spoke about pricing, right? Where some cocoa farmers had sold their cocoa beans and waiting for government to make the payment. And the cocoa cratchers will go to the district capitals like, Bekwai. And when they come back, they'll come and tell, oh, I'm buying it into ya. Right? So they were waiting for that money to, have some good Christmas celebration when they were not getting. Imagine this farmer is told that, look, there is a buyer nearby who is willing to sell it to you, to buy at, let's say, 4,000 or 5,000 Ghana cedis per bag. I'm not sure that they will sell to the cocoa cratcher who will then go and sell to Cocoa Board in the district capitals. And so you see that even when we are all falling, Ivory Coast is still able to fall or still able to produce above 1 million tons a year. And we have gone...
Apart from 2020, 2021.
When we were
actually...
In fact, exactly. We were the leading producer. Now we make it big and say the two of us contribute 60% of the world's production. But if you disaggregate it, you realize that our contribution is just roughly around 14%.
Right.
The remaining over 45% goes to Ivory Coast. And it means that we are gradually losing our power as a key powerhouse for cocoa production. And when we...
In fact, it's interesting to note, Kofi, the steady trajectory of, the graph over there. It means they're doing something consistently every time. Whereas we go up, we dip, we come back up again, and it looks like we are going down a dip. So they have been able to sustain what they've been doing for some time now. What's interesting about that?
I think it's regulation. What the intelligence we are gathering from Ivory Coast is that they do not have such, 100% regulated system like we have. So it's a bit flexible in Côte d'Ivoire, and they've actually placed a lot of premium on cocoa production. And mind you, we have a peculiar situation that they don't have, illegal mining. It's not as dire in Ivory Coast like it is in Ghana, where you have key regions that are cocoa producing regions like the Ashanti region, Western region, Central region, Ahafo, Western North. All the key regions that are the cocoa powerhouses are all battling with illegal mining. And we saw that cocoa farms had actually destroyed about, I think, 35,000 hectares of lands, right? I mean, illegal mining. And we've seen, documentaries where people are crying and their farmlands have been taken over by illegal miners and all of that. There is that problem that we have that the Ivory Coast doesn't have. And so we will all be suffering from the swollen shoot disease, the bad weather conditions, the El Nino and what have you. But once you have a peculiar situation and you've not been able to deal with illegal mining, you will be producing below 1 million, tons, and they will still be able to produce above, that threshold.
But there's an interesting point, Kofi. And there was a time, I remember some of the data, it analyzed cocoa producers, including Latin America, all countries.
Yeah, remember that.
From, I think, the 1950s.
Exactly.
If you look at the trajectory, you'll see that Côte d'Ivoire has always been pretty consistent in terms of their production versus ours. You must also factor in the bit about political upheavals.
Exactly.
Periods of military interventions in politics and how they have affected our farming or agri-sector, including cocoa. But especially if you look at from the 1990s, 2000s, it appears while they have distanced themselves, because mind you, at a point Brazil was the biggest producer. Then Côte d'Ivoire came. Then Ghana came into the picture. There are times where Ghana has been the topmost producer, including as recently as 2021. But it appears to be something systemic that we are not getting right, and which has made Côte d'Ivoire, like you said, when you disaggregate the data, 60%, but they are producing what?
Yeah.
Usually it's around 40%, but now thanks to where we are, about 45%.
There is one other aspect that I think we should talk about is the incentive to smuggle, where in Ivory Coast you have inflation around 3%. Our inflation went as high as 54% in 2022. Yeah. So if you pay the farmer, let's say around that time was 1,800 per bag or so, what is that farmer able to buy with that? The purchasing power for that farmer was very low, so they'll look for alternatives, right? And there's another aspect that talks about, the exchange rate situation, where in our case, it's actually worse, where, in any time the dollar is not really performing well, we see that everything in the economy also struggles. So that is some of the, I think, fundamentals that Ivory Coast have had, right, that we have not. They've still been able to keep inflation within a single digit, bracket, where we are still struggling to even move below 20%. And so farmers there have a bigger purchasing power compared to our farmers here, right? And it is difficult. If the farmer even wants to build, the price of cement is skyrocketing, iron rods, almost everything is expensive. And so that farmer will farm all right, get all the money all right. You see the increments from government every year, but inflation is eating a big chunk of that farmer's purchasing power. And when there's an incentive to smuggle, they surely will bend.
Interesting picture. But what does the future look like?
I think that this is a future for me because there seems to be a trade-off between gold and cocoa.
Indeed.
The more we are getting revenues from gold, the less we are getting from cocoa. And there is that relationship between the impact of illegal mining on cocoa production. And this graph tells it pretty well, where we've seen that we've climbed from somewhere $7 billion a year for gold to now $11.6 billion, revenue from gold. Cocoa, on the other hand, is declining. And there's that contrast, there's that, opposite relationship between the two of them. And the gap is widening. That tells you that as a country, maybe we are prioritizing gold above cocoa, but we should know that even the gold, it can be 12 billion, it can be 15 billion, but we only get a certain small component. Cocoa, even if it is 1 billion, we get more than 90% of that. And so if you're able to get more from cocoa, then that will be the assurance for the stability of the city. Because this gold, if you look at the Auditor General's report and you see the amount that is surrendered even to the Bank of Ghana,
right,
you will not even think that we should focus more on gold because everything is exported and everything is taken away. And the amount even surrendered to the central bank, sometimes even less than $1 billion.
And I concur here that there's an even more interesting picture, which is why I would say we should focus more on cocoa, because the gold is there and we've not even renegotiated better deals with these global mining outfits. But there's an interesting trend we are not producing that much more gold. Ounces.
Yeah.
It is that the pricing has gone up. So we are not producing that much more, but at the same time, cocoa production is dwindling. So the gold has stabilized. If the price of gold falls, you come back to square one, but because your cocoa production is falling, also related to, or with that correlation with galamsey, you are killing the cocoa industry. And what you could have got, now you've lost a component of 1.1 billion on that, which is almost half what you are getting from the IMF. Do you see the dynamic?
I do.
You are not increasing gold production that much to say we are using it to catch up on what we are losing from cocoa, yet you are impacting the cocoa industry with the same gold production. You are losing at both ends.
In fact, Ben, in 2022, when we saw the cedi moving from, I think somewhere 5 cedis or 6 cedis or 7 cedis to 15 cedis per dollar, right? One thing that helped the economy to stabilize a bit was the cocoa syndicated loan that came in around that time. And the other 750 million loan that we got from elsewhere. Now, this is how the syndicated loan is actually arranged. You need to go and get a lead arranger who will then go and look for the banks to come and invest and all of that. And when you are going, the assurance that they will be looking for, sweetie, is how much are you producing this year?
Yeah.
Now, I am sure they will be looking at this data and say, but how do we give Ghana over $1 billion, dollars when we are not even sure that they will be able to produce 500,000 tons?
Is that what happened last year? Because
the same thing happened last year, exactly. Last year, we were able to arrange for, I think, about somewhere around $600 million. But at the end of the day, more than 800 million, by the end of the day, we could not draw, I think, $200 million or so because we could not get the needed beans to assure the investors that, look, if you give us this money, we can produce. And they came out, international traders came out to say that just by trading with Ghana, they lost close to $1.4 billion. Why? Wow. Because, yes, they locked in the price at, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000. You're supposed to produce and provide the cocoa beans. You're not able to do that. What they do is that they would have to go to their inventories to supply the people that they also have arrangements with. And when they are restocking their inventories, if they restock, or if they had their inventories around $2,000 per ton and they are restocking, it will be at the prevailing price of, say, 11,000 or 10,000. So that is where the loss came from. And so this year, the reason why we are saying we are doing self-financing is simply because we could not get the needed beans to assure investors that we can produce. And because they know our situation, they place a very high coupon rate on the loans that they will give to us. That's rather unfortunate.
Thank you so much for putting in perspective Ghana's sinking cocoa export revenue, declining cocoa production in tons. That was a wonderful presentation. And Ben, of course, did a fantastic job. But we have to move on. And before we go, let me tell you about SolarMate Ghana. You want to select a solar system from our various solar packages, ranging from 30,000 cedis to 99,000 Ghana cedis. And all our solar systems come with lithium-ion batteries. So get a solar water heater, a solar home system, a solar power station, or a solar generator ranging from 1,000 watts to 20,000 watts. And we also sell reverse osmosis machines for water treatment. Google SolarMate Ghana to find us both on Facebook and on Instagram, or simply contact us on 050-832-0470. SolarMate Ghana is located at Adringano, East Legon. SolarMate, we go everywhere.
We go everywhere, indeed. Interesting bits.
I thought you were going to tell us more, but I think it's time for us to take a break. Yeah. When we return, we'll bring you more. Benjamin Akakpo's Ben, what are you talking about?
I've titled it of Committees, Promises, Parliament, and Our Economy. Assessing the salient issues.
Okay, we can't wait. That comes up next. Stay on the AM show.